ago, we talked about what is Ohio State's culture. We defined it for everybody. Now I want to tear it apart because,
Nice.
that's what I do. I want to talk about what are culture killers. What what little things can creep into the Ohio State program that could kill this culture that has been built over the last 6 years under Ryan Day? And I've got some things, and I asked these guys to come up with some ideas as well. In chat, we'll ask you to put some of your ideas in the chat as well. What are some culture killers uh, that could happen? Dev, I'll let you start, man. Give me one, and what's your reasoning why?
Well, all these new coaches coming in, it's not just, a lot of the analyst roles, but you got Matt P coming in as defensive coordinator. So that's a guy where a lot of people are worried about that particular thing right there. So you got all these coaches coming in with different ideas. You can butt heads with other coaches or coach kids a certain way. And all these analysts, all the offensive line coach analysts coming in. We just hired another wide receiver coach analyst. I mean, this happens frequently, but I haven't went back and looked how many more new coaches, for instance, compared to last year or whatever. So, that's a pretty obvious one, I think, is new coaches coming in, but it ultimately boils down to, Ryan Day vetted these guys and, he's not going to, I don't think he's going to allow that to happen, but you got to keep an eye on that, man. New coaches coming in, especially people like Matt P, who have, maybe a little bit of a shaky past with how they treat players and different things like that, depending on who you believe and what you read. But yeah, coaches coming in for sure.
Can we expound upon that maybe a little bit? Like new coaches coming in, but like what would they have to do? What would have to happen with those new coaches?
So they would have to like carry a disagreement that they have with another coach to the players, right? If they have a disagreement with Larry Johnson on how they want things to go, instead of handling it in house with the other coaches, Matt P decides to go and vent with some of the defensive line leaders in the room and say, hey, man, Larry Johnson's wanting to do this, but don't you agree that we should do this? Trying to get players on your side instead of handling it, you know, in house where just coaches should be conversating, I think. That and just little things, man. This might sound crazy, but words are very powerful. So the way you talk to players, the language that you use, um, the music that you're listening to. I know those all might sound like little tiny things, but when you bring a new coach in who has the power to make bigger decisions, it doesn't take much to alter and swing a culture a certain direction. So if he's got the ability to make those changes, but I think ultimately it's how do you handle disagreements between coaches if you're a coach? Are you letting your aggravation with another coach bleed down to your relationships with the players that you're coaching? Are you bringing those arguments down to the player levels in an unhealthy manner? I know they have the team meetings and there's certain things players should be involved in, but are you talking bad about the coach that you don't like behind their back with other players? Like that can cause division in a team. And that's the worst thing that can happen in a culture is ways to cause division. So,
Right.
that would be my more specific thing that you would think about.
Um,
If that answers your question.
it does. So now I'm going to throw a ripple into that argument because I've been thinking about this a lot. And that was last year at about this time. Uh, it might even been a couple more weeks out ahead. Tony Alford left the program and went to your rival. As an outsider looking in, I have to question why a coach would leave a program for your rival program who you supposedly just spent X amount of years preaching to those players about beating that team, and then you turn around and go to that team. Um, it seems to me like you're not really practicing what you preach when you do that. It's kind of hypocritical. And I almost wondered, hear me out. This is kind of tinfoil hat wearing stuff here. If, in a way, Tony Alford leaving the program was kind of like getting cancer out of your culture in a way. And I know a lot of people talk about Tony Alford in a positive light, especially his players who played for him. But sometimes it's the bigger picture beyond just what's taking place in a position room when it comes to the overall health of your program and your culture. The bigger picture is that there's those little schisms, those little divisions like you talked about, Dev, that can get in your program. And I've been thinking, how crazy is it? Tony Alford leaves, goes to Michigan, they beat us, then we go on to win a national championship.
Yeah.
Like, trying to make sense of that within the framework of culture is where I'm kind of struggling. You got any thoughts with that?
Well, I would say that dude was around forever. Okay, so you had people coming in, and that's all they experienced was him, his coaching style, his ideas, his ways of communication. So you're not going to really understand if that's a cancer or if that's a bad thing for the culture until you experience something different that could potentially be better. And I think we hit the nail on the head with the hire, bringing Coach Locke in
Oh yeah.
and experiencing somebody that takes that culture to the next level. The guy that has that passion, that fire to show up earlier than all the players, to do the drills with the players, to live that life, man, to come out of that stuff. So you got Coach Alfred, who's been in the program forever with his ways of doing things, and it almost becomes the norm. So that that cancer that you're speaking of isn't brought about because it's so normal that you don't realize that it's doing this to your program. You don't even know it because you've never experienced anything other than that. So there could be those little hidden divisions in there. I mean, case in point, man. I mean, we almost lost a recruit because he left. Why? Because he didn't communicate with the coaches about about how much James People should be getting. You know what I'm saying? So laziness, right? I mean, that's just what it came down to, man. And plus, he saw his time coming, man. Didn't get the extension, the whole 9 yards, recruiting going downhill. So, I think it's one of those things that you don't know, right, until you experience something, better. That, hey, man, oh my gosh, we let that go on for that long in here. That was not normal. That was not okay to be that like lazy. Like if your work ethic's here, but it's been that way the whole time, everybody thinks you're working as hard as you can. You know what I'm saying? But you're really not. You've just been doing it for so long, people think that's all you got. And then Coach Locke comes in and doubles it. And it's like, oh, wow, that's what this should have looked like.
Cory, what's your thoughts on this, man?
I think I'm thinking more in the macro effect. Is Ryan Day? Did he keep Tony Alford because he was a young head coach who just didn't know better when he got hired? And he just hung on to guys that Urban Meyer liked. I know he did do that with the defensive staff, but he had it because he had connections to San Francisco with Jeff Halfley and things like that. So, and now Washington was a connection from way back when in Boston College and stuff. But Ryan Day's whole he's so young of a coach. He doesn't have that Rolodex. He doesn't have his connections going 30 years back or whatever, like Urban's and the Knicks and the Bills, and I think even Matt Patricia's a little bit of that. Like he had to lean on Bill Belichick, Urban Meyer, and people like that to ask around about these guys. He even tried to get an interview with DJ Durkin. That's an old Meyer guy. So it's like I just think that he hung on to Tony Alford because he didn't really know what to do, who to go get, who was better. And I think that Yeah, I think Devin's right that Tony saw the writing on the wall. He'll deny this. He's denied it on X. I don't really care. He got a bigger paycheck. He leveraged it into a bigger paycheck with Michigan. Fine, but the writing was on the wall. He and Day were not in sync, and Day was probably not going to extend him, and he was probably going to end up being replaced anyway. And it sounds like when he did leave, Day wasn't even panicked about it. He kind of already had a binder of guys that he liked.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is it's going to keep the culture together. In my opinion, the number one thing, there's a million things, but the number one thing is Ryan Day making that turn, that pivot into I'm the guy now. I am that dude now. So now he knows, I know I can go pick up who I want when I want for an assistant, and I have my reasons for doing so. Carlos Locke was a great pickup. He's funny. He's a little older guy, 47. He got into coaching late, and it's like he's had such an impact. I don't know if he has aspirations to ever move on to be like an OC or something like that. Maybe he just wants to be that that running back coach. But I also think he picked a guy and Locke, who emphasizes what Ryan Day really wants in his culture, which is physicality and toughness. Ryan Day wants that desperately in his culture, and Locke represents that to a T. Alford never did. Alford was never that guy. Is like I've never. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to say running backs like Mayan Williams obviously showed toughness. I think Henderson has shown toughness at times, and Alford wasn't a total failure as a running back coach, but there was always a little something missing, obviously. And when he left, somehow we got better immediately. So there was a little bit of holdback there. So I think Ryan Day is finally starting to figure out what he wants and who he wants in his program.
Yeah. Dev, I know you said you had to leave at this time. Do you have any final thoughts before you take off, brother?
Uh, just my last thing will be as far as culture goes that we lost all the senior leadership, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's really going to be important, for these players to step up, right? For position group coaches to get with certain players in their room and let them know, hey, man, we got all these new recruits coming in. We got a couple guys coming in from the portal. We cannot stray from the championship family developed here culture that we have built. We cannot stray from it. Continue with the brothers before you continued. They took home the birthday cake, man. They took home everything. This is the culture that we need. So I know for a fact inside the Woody that they're really hounding on that. They know they lost all that senior leadership, the Cody Simons, the Donovan Jacksons, and they are pushing for the Bennett Christians and the Carson Hinsmans and even the Julian Sayans, these younger players. They've got to develop that leadership, right, to continue the culture that they have. They can't let, even if you're younger, you can't let some of these older transfer players come in here and push you around with their culture from their other school. You've got to, exert the
Yeah.
championship culture that Ryan Day has there. And, I don't think Ryan Day, I think that's one of his number one coaching qualities is the culture that he, has built there, man, because it's hard to get an offer and it's even harder to get that offer accepted. We see players all the time who are like, why would you not offer them? Why would you not get them here? Well, I think the hidden gem there is that they weren't the right culture fit. I really,
Mm-hmm.
really do. So
Yeah.
that's a lot that the fan base don't think about. We just see 6'7", 320, good feet, long arms. He's got to be our left tackle. Well, maybe he don't fit in, man. Ryan Day
Mm-hmm.
just will not take somebody that's not a good culture fit. He
Yeah,
will not
Deb, you're
do it.
so right. There's too many people who look at this like college football 25 or Madden or whatever, and they
Yeah,
just you
Right.
yeah.
plug and play the guy, and that's it.
There's real life going on here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think the word that Ryan Day uses is they must assimilate into our culture. I think he's said that multiple times when talking about transfer players. And you're so right, Devin. And I think that's a great comment. Um, so this is a really, really interesting conversation, man. I think culture is, for the longest time, I felt like culture was kind of overrated a little bit. And now I feel like when Ryan Day said, and he said this twice on two different occasions, I've heard him say this, we won the national championship the right way. And I think some of it's kind of a slighted hand at Michigan a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
maybe. But I also think what he's saying is we built a culture that culture we believed in, and it has sustained us through some difficult moments, and we are reaping the rewards
Mhm.
now of having built that culture. Um, Let me ask you this question.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, this is something else I've been thinking about. I think there's a distinct difference between Urban Meyer's culture and Ryan Day's culture. And I don't think one is greater than the other, but I do think this. Tell me if I'm right or wrong.
You're wrong. No, don't.
Ryan Day's culture is more sustainable over a long period of time.
I actually agree with that. I mean, Urban's proved that he's not sustainable over a long period of time. He keeps, 7 years and he's out. And part of it is because I think the culture of Urban Meyer is incredible intensity at all times, incredible work ethic at all times. There's no downtime. There's no, I don't, I mean, I'm not saying he didn't love his players. I'm not saying the players didn't love each other, but that wasn't the focus per se. Whereas I think Ryan Day does focus on making a family atmosphere. In fact, it's been criticized by guys like Zach Smith as being too country club sometimes, where it's not hard enough work ethic. Whereas Urban would like just throw you through a window if you didn't run the drill right. Um, Urban's definitely more old school. Ryan Day's more new school, and I think new school in today's NIL package because honestly, going into this season with $20 million roster and blah 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 blah, when things were down, all they had to lean on was each other. That's all they had. And Ryan Day still facilitated that even when he was hurting within the team by team meetings and talk it out. What's wrong? What did we do wrong here? What do you think about our coaching? What do you just getting everybody's vibes and everybody's thoughts? And I'll tell you one thing: when people feel heard, they will work harder for you. That's just a psychological fact. That's been done study after study after study. And I think the players felt heard. I think the players felt loved by their coach. He shielded them from the negativity. Even though they knew what was going on, he shielded it and he took the blame. He always takes the blame. So he doesn't ever talk badly about a player or anything like that. And I just think they look at him as like I'm almost a second father figure. And I think you kind of have to do that in today's world. I don't think the old school way of coaching I love the Tom Izzos of the world. I love the Urban Meyers and Nick Sabans of the world. I just don't think that way of coaching works in today's world as much, unless you have just an incredible, like Nick Saban, just an insane reputation to where people flock to you just for the reputation alone, almost. Not to say he wasn't obviously a great coach even in his older years, but I just don't think I think his way wore him out in today's
Oh yeah.
world. So
Um, um, I, Urban is um allergic to losing,
yeah,
and it's toxic to him.
except in break, he didn't break out in hives or anything. He actually just goes to bars and like hits on women or something.
Well, he actually has brain issues.
That's true.
um, I feel like Urban is kind of like a whirlwind, man. He comes in, he shakes it up, he leans heavy on everybody, he gets the most out of everybody, and then it kind of burns down,
Yeah.
and then it's like it wears on him. Um, I think if there's anything that you have to tip your hat to when it comes to Nick Saban was very similar to that, but he knew
Mhm.
where the line was and he never crossed the line. And because of that, it maybe was that kind of style was sustainable and obviously successful as well as McDonald's bags. But um, you know what I mean? Like when we're talking about
McDonald's
culture,
fuels champions, man.
it does, man. It's I'm loving it. Um,
Nice.
Bama. I'm loving it.
Yeah, we know that
Yes.
Maserati and the.
But you get my point.
Mm,
Like Nick Saban had a culture that was kind of similar to Urban's. Urban's would last 6, 7 years, and that was it. Nick Saban lasted, 20,
yeah.
and had a ton of championships along the way with it because he just knew how to not cross that line where I think Urban didn't. Ryan Day's going about this a completely different way, and now we've seen that hey, it bore some fruit. Here's my next question with this. If bad coaches who take advantage of this culture and aren't maybe putting forth the effort that is needed for success, or we have another Larry Johnson, Jim Knowles thing that becomes public. Like that thing, no one might know how bad that was until years later because
Yeah.
they really kept that quiet. Even though some of it got out, like it was never like they never talked about it with the media. Like it was zip, right? Um, Having a coach go to the media with something like that could kill a culture.
I 100% agree.
Um,
You got to
and
keep
I
that indoors.
Yeah, and I wonder how much of the Tony Alford effect because of like Ryan Day took that personally because here's a guy who supposedly is helping him build that culture who then turns around and says, "You know what? I'm going to spit on your culture and go to the very place that you are building this culture to beat." Like I would take that extremely personally. If
Yeah, but I think Tony wouldn't have left if he didn't feel pushed out, if that makes sense. Ryan Day didn't outright fire him, but it was very curious as to why he was not extending him. And it looked, I mean, and Ryan Day honestly looked happy. I mean, when he left, there was something there that just wasn't clicking anymore. Because I mean, I remember when Ryan Day said, "I get to coach running backs this week. I'm happy." I'm like, most coaches would be annoyed by that kind of stuff. Like, oh, jeez, man, he left spring ball. We got to scramble to find somebody. Ryan Day was as calm as he looked as
yeah,
calm as he did after he won the Natty.
yeah.
He was just he just didn't care. He's like, he probably like I said, he probably got a binder of people that he knew he could replace him with.
And
And
it makes me wonder if there was more going on there than what we
I
realized. And
probably
he was kind of
was.
like, good.
I probably was. And I don't know if this is for members stuff, but I've had at least 1-2 conversations with Tony on Twitter. He was, I mean, he vented to me one time and he was frustrated about something. Not necessarily Ryan Day, more about the fan base. He was frustrated about a few things. So the coaches actually hear the criticism too. So it was and he was always nice to me though. I'm not going to say everything bad about him. He was always kind to me. But yeah, he was definitely he felt frustrated at times, especially after the Bijan Robinson stuff. He was pretty frustrated.
Oh, I imagine because that was the class where we also lost Knightley to
Yeah,
Miami, and we
he
had
didn't
I
amount to anything though, thankfully. But
he did. You're right, he didn't, and a lot of those Florida guys who commit, decommit, and then go to Florida, their careers are very like very seldom do they actually hit. But Bijan probably would have helped us win a national
well,
championship.
Bijan even admitted it now, so I can say Bijan straight up lied to the coaching staff at Ohio
Yeah,
State.
yeah, I've heard that. Yeah, like he was in, and then all of a
Yeah,
sudden he wasn't.
he was
Yeah,
absolutely in the class. Yes.
yeah, yeah. Um, what is another culture
I'm
killer
going to
in your
disagree with
mind?
this comment real quick.
Okay,
2019 Ohio State, we had an amazing run game.
yeah, we
Uh,
did.
Trey
Big
Sermon the
headed.
next year also broke the singles game record. I mean, I wasn't all year that great, but I think we've had, I mean, I'll say that we'd started out, we had a really great run game. And then we started veering towards that CJ Stroud 7-on-7, Oklahoma, like almost Big
Offense.
12 type style. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Um,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no. What's another culture killer that you might have on your list or
I
you want
have
to
it in
talk
my
about?
notes. If our recruiting ever starts to suffer, because and I would normally would never say that with Ohio State. This was 10 years ago. It's our recruiting's not going to suffer. We're going to be fine. But with NIL, if all of a sudden the foundations dry up, the donations dry up, or people, it's almost like coaches' careers now are in the hands of donors instead of the hands of wins and losses and being able to get kids to come to Ohio State. It's like, well, guess what? We don't like you. Your NIL is going to dry up. You're not going to be able to recruit. Ohio State, by a name in itself, cannot get these guys anymore just by itself. So, in the day of NIL and transfer portals, I could absolutely see it being harder than ever to construct a roster to your needs. And also, sometimes and then do we get to a point where Ryan Day has to sacrifice culture a little bit to get a guy because we're like, we have nobody at quarterback. We've got to go get somebody. Last year, we were blessed and lucky to get Will Howard because he came in. It wasn't just his ability to play ball, but just his attitude, his personality fit perfect with what we needed in our culture. But some days you might end up with a Cam Ward where you're like, talented guy, but is he a prima donna? Is he a leader? Will Howard was not a prima donna, and he was an
Mm-mm.
absolute leader.
Yeah, 100%.
So, and he may not be as talented as Cam Ward, but he's everything Cam Ward isn't intangibly. So, are we going to have to get to a point where it's like, oh my gosh, to win, I have to sacrifice, the human element of it just to get somebody who's prodigiously talented?
Can I add the Georgia effect to this now?
Yeah,
In the sense that, is Georgia one bad season away from falling apart because they actually don't have a sustainable culture?
I think you're onto something there, Eric. I was wondering the same thing to myself weeks ago. I was like, I think Kirby's very in danger of losing it at Georgia. I really do. Can't have 37 DUIs and there's not
No.
be a problem.
Yeah. Like, you have recruited a ton of talent,
Hmm.
but I don't know if and their culture was the ATL,
Hmm.
we're the dogs, we're
Hmm.
gonna come in barking and we're just bigger, badder, faster, stronger,
They were the
and
Canes of the 1990s, early 90s.
yes,
Yeah.
and that mentality, unfortunately for them, I think has left the football field and has made its way into aspects of their lives, to where off the field they're not doing the right things to be successful in life,
Hmm.
not just talking football.
Yep.
And that kind of stuff then can come, it's reciprocal, it comes back around and it starts to affect your play on the field.
Hmm.
I think we saw some cracks in the foundation this year,
I
and
agree.
I'm wondering if Kirby doesn't get some leaders in that program to straighten the path up for them, if they could fall apart. And so I began to think, how does that relate to what Ohio State's doing here? And I think this all comes back to the leaders in the locker room.
Hmm.
So we just lost 17 potential NFL guys.
Yeah, that's huge.
15 for sure,
Yep.
maybe 17, cuz I'll give credit to G. Scott Jr., whether he gets drafted or not, all day long. That guy was a cultured dude.
Yep. And he stayed when he could have
Absolutely.
left.
Yes.
And his dad admitted he told him to leave. So.
Fryer, the same thing. Like,
Hmm.
even though Fryer was, he worked hard, he could have left and probably started at Kent or Akron within his third year, but he stuck it out and ended up playing 2 years at Ohio State at right tackle. I don't think he'll get drafted, but
I think
he's
he,
going to.
I think people are crazy not to draft him, and you would have never heard me say that last year, but it's like he could be a guard in the NFL, a backup somewhere.
I think he's definitely going to get a shot.
Yeah,
He'll definitely get a phone call and be a,
invite to a rookie
in
camp.
yeah,
Yeah.
an NFL invitee. Um, but I digress. Finding those guys, those voices in the locker room who aren't paid to be coaches,
Hmm.
and who can continue that sustained culture that Ohio State has built, I think is critical. And I also think that might be what is happening to Georgia. They've lost a ton of guys to the NFL, a ton of guys.
Hmm.
Um, so that to me could be a culture killer. You have nobody step up in the locker room who can lead verbally and by example.
Yeah, I don't know who the leaders on Georgia are. I mean, normally when you have leaders and they're in the national spotlight that way, you know who they are. And like everybody knew who Ohio State's leaders were going into going into the playoff this year. I I agree with you. I think I think that's why Ryan Day has been so adamant about building the culture, because he's like, well, we have to have the foundation that lasts no matter what. We have to know what we want. As I said, like I say, I compare it to the NFL. I'm a Packers fan, and the Packers draft a certain way, right? They get guys that mirror the kind of guys they want, and they don't. That's why they always have so many surprise picks. Like, what the heck? Where'd that guy come from? It's like because somebody will say, "What was their comp?" and it's a former Packer. And they have a specific kind of guy they want. I think Ryan Day has gotten in that mode at Ohio State. He has a specific kind of player he wants to recruit, wants to get in the transfer portal. It's not just a matter. I think Kirby Smart is almost in the old school days of just get the most talented guys you can possibly get. Who cares? We'll make it work later. We'll figure it out later. Whereas, and in one day in time that used to work. I don't think that works anymore. I think in the days of NIL, when people's motives are a little different than they used to be, you have to build that culture, and you have to get kids to buy into something beyond the football field. And I think that's why we paid so much money. Is wasn't just because of how talented these guys were. I mean, Jack Sawyer, JT, Trevian, these were. There's a lot of them. I know. I'm not going to name all of them. They were just good dudes on top of the fact they were good ball players. And I think Ryan Day feels like, well, if you're not a good person that's helping the locker room move forward, then I don't care how talented you are. I'm not giving you. I mean, I know for a fact, like Damon Wilson's another one. I'm not going to go into it, but there's reasons why we didn't try to get him over Missouri. you know, so I mean, I don't know how good or bad a character he is, but apparently there's some things that went on between the NIL there that Ryan Day was not comfortable with.
Hmm.
So, and people like get mad. Now I see the Twitter, they get mad. Why Ryan Day? We need this kid. Why don't you get Ryan Day? It's just if he's won a natty, let's give him the trust that he knows what kind of player we need to have in that locker room.
Yeah. So, you could have a lack of leadership could actually lead to a loss of culture. You could have bad coaches who can destroy the culture. Um, Here's the last one I want to bring up, and this one I think is really really interesting. And maybe we don't have actually time to get into it, but you could have fake culture. Here's what I mean by that.
False bravado. Yeah.
Yeah. So COVID hit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you can talk culture all day long, and I think if I'm about to make a statement, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong.
You're wrong. No.
You say it every time. That's why I went like that. If COVID were to happen today, Ohio State would be even more successful than they were in 2020.
That's interesting. Um,
Ryan Day was so young.
I think he'd definitely handle it better. I'm getting cringes
Not
thinking
that
of it.
he not that he did wrong. Like
Yeah.
I think he did well. We went to a national championship that year.
Yep.
I mean, we got blown out, but we went, right? And
I
not all
mean,
of that was on him, but I'm just
no,
saying
you
like
can't lose Togiai and lose Sermon first play, and
but I digress. I think the culture is healthier now than it was then. At least it's more established. That is
hmm
100% fact. I think he'd be more even excuse me, even more successful.
I agree because not to mention that Natty helps, man. Now he's got that clout, and when you have that clout, you become the glue that can keep that culture together. you know, because Ryan Day's still pretty hands on. He's not a guy who's just going to be. I mean, he's a CEO now, but he's not a guy who's just sitting in his office, letting things run. I mean, he's hands on everywhere. He has his fingerprints on everything, and I think that's a good thing for Ohio State. He delegates more, but he has his fingerprints on things, and he's got people he trusts. Yeah, I agree. I think we would be more successful now. I think we. I don't think there's any. I mean, if we had, but it's hard to say too because remember we had Kevin Warren who cut us off for half the season, and then
Karen Warren is what we call
yeah,
him.
yeah, exactly. And then the SEC is like, I don't care. You didn't line up the dead bodies from COVID. I don't care. They were just like, let's just go. So it's just like Alabama had a lot more season to to them than we did. But I think if everybody, all things being equal, I think absolutely Ohio State would be the favorites tomorrow based on culture if COVID happened again. But man, I don't want to think about COVID happening again.
You've got I mean, think of how wild that was. You had Nick Saban who had 17 years of building that program and culture up
Mm-hmm.
with less restrictions and more games played,
Mm-hmm.
going up against Ryan Day, who had 2 years of culture building and literally was missing half his roster. Like, I mean, come on, man. Like, it's so unfair to even really, yeah, Steely says 20 missing players. Like, I mean, goodness sakes, dude. Um,
Yeah, they
I
played
just
14
feel
games.
like
We
it would
played
be
7. Yeah.
completely. I think it would be completely reversed. Like, let's hypothetically. And again, I don't want to give anybody PTSD because trust me, I don't want to ever go through that again. But
I hope America doesn't want to go through that again.
no kidding. But if we were to flip it and say in 2025 during a COVID season, Ryan Day versus DeBoer, give me Ryan Day. I think he's got
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
the roles have completely reversed in those situations, which tells me that the culture at Ohio State is there. Like
Hmm.
it's where he wants it to be. Um, so when I say fake culture, and I know that was a really long way to get to my explanation of what I was talking about, but when I say fake culture, it's what I mean is you say you're one thing, but then when adversity hits or the
Yeah.
rubber meets the road, it's you're not really what you say you are,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, I mean that's false bravado. I mean, the best example in the world is Tate Martell. Better not miss his strike and miss or whatever hit twice, and then he's gone a week later. It's like there's a lot of teams who talk about that. I think at times we've been that, where we talk tough and we're this and that. The second things don't go away in the game, it collapses, everything falls apart. There's been that Ohio State way in the
Yeah,
past.
the here we go again.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's triggering at times, and you think, "Hey, you guys tell." I don't know how many, and I'll say this about Ryan Day. I love Ryan Day, but there's been so many times during his career where he's like, "We're going to come out and play fast," and it's like 17-14 in the middle of third quarter against like Akron or something, and it's like you just said we were ready to play. You said we were going to play fast. I'll tell you one thing though, Ryan Day. We can't claim that about Ryan Day's culture right now. When they worst loss in Ryan Day's history as a coach against that team up north, and they respond like that. That's proven culture right there. That's not fake culture right there. If we had if we had got trounced by Tennessee the very next game, you could say Ryan Day, your culture is fake. Everything you talk about is fake. Whenever there's adversity, we crack. But Ryan Day can now point to his culture building and say, "We are the real thing."
Yeah. Man, this is an interesting conversation. Is there anything else in your notes you want to hit on?
Oh, I hit like 10 things actually, but some of them actually are kind of mutually inclusive with everything else. Off the field issues. I talked about NIL, inability to adapt because college football's adapt. Or I mean, Ryan Day,
Oh my gosh.
he's
Yeah.
been. I'll give this to Ryan Day. Chris Carter said it, and it shut me up when he said it because it was so profound. The freaking college football's changed every couple of years. He's been a head coach completely. And he's had to adapt to it on the fly constantly, and he's
Mm-hmm.
still managing to have a successful 70-10 record. Now he's got massive trophies to put in the trophy room there. Again, that's just incredible that if there's any coach you could have faith in adapting to college football, it's Ryan
I
freaking Day.
agree. I
I mean,
agree.
there's just I don't even know who I can't even point to a coach who's adapted as well as he has. Really, to be perfectly honest, but most of the stuff kind of falls under the umbrella of culture. I think. So like I said, off the field issues. Well, that's culture, right? So I don't really have to come up with that. But I think this adaptability and things like that, and keeping a locker room not toxic. He's done a great job at that. I think, but that comes with leadership in the locker rooms. Now, here's the interesting point: do they love Julian Sand not only because he can throw the ball a mile and he's extremely accurate, or also because they could see leadership in him?
Mm, that's a great question.
That's what we're gonna all find out.
Yeah, that is a really good. CJ Stroud underrated leader.
Yeah, he was. He started the Christian craze at Ohio State. And I say that like it's a negative thing. It's not a negative thing, obviously, but I think he was the first one I've ever saw at Ohio State just constantly professing his faith.
Yeah.
And
I
all of a
think there
sudden,
were
you
some
see
other.
80 guys doing it.
Well, I think there were some other guys who
Mhm.
just weren't as r- weren't being as interviewed as much as
That's
CJ
probably
Stroud
true.
was.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Master Teague the third was one of
He
the
was definitely
first.
very,
Yeah.
very faithful. Yeah.
Yeah. What's his name? Not Caleb. Bab.
Cameron Babb. Yeah.
Cameron Bab was
One of the
was one.
great stories of Ohio State history
Oh my
that won't be
gosh.
told as much, but should be.
That touchdown.
Oh, we all were
Mm.
crying. Are you
Yeah,
kidding
we
me?
were, man. Yeah, we were. That was
And then he got down on his knees and praised God.
yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
tell you, keep him around the program. There's leadership right there.
He is, isn't he? Isn't
Yeah,
he
he's
part of
around.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Make him a GA or something. I don't know, but put him in that program because
Yeah.
you want people like that around your kids.
The minister of culture. make a make a make a position, man.
I don't care what it is. Pay him and let him do his thing with the players.
Yeah. I haven't watched it yet, but CJ, he was a wide receiver. He walk on wide receiver.
CJ Saunders.
Saunders.
Mm-hmm.
He has a testimony about how the culture at Ohio State changed his life.
That's
And
awesome.
and because of that, as he's faced things since football, how that has set him up to be more successful in life, including starting his own business.
Good for him, man.
Because of it. So many things about that culture that we don't even know.
Yep.
We don't hear about. That causes this team and this school to be successful. So much so, I would love to know when parents and players go on their official visits to Ohio State and they see the culture up close in person, how that affects them. Now, at the end of the day, I'm not naive. NIL is still a huge part of whether you go to a school or not. Okay.
But if you're matching somebody's NIL, that's when the culture becomes like, okay, but I want my kid around that culture.
Mm-hmm.
Because it isn't just about, I mean, I was so, look, I love Joe Burrow, but what he said was so freaking stupid about whoever offers you more, go to them. It's just like, that is, no. I mean, say Texas is offering you 100,000 more than like Ohio State's offering you because that's what they have budgeted for NIL. Well, why not take the less money? You're still getting great money, and you get to be around a culture that's going to set you up for success. If I'm the parent, I'm thinking, I get it. You're getting a little less at Ohio State. I don't care. You're going to be around a guy who literally saved a kid's life.
Yeah.
You're
We
going
didn't
to be
even
around a
mention mental health.
exactly. You're going to be a
Which
guy who
is
puts a focus on your mental health, who understands if you are in trouble, I know you can go to that coach and he will save your life.
yeah, like it's you want to talk about someone putting their money where their mouth is. That's
Literally.
exactly what Ryan Day has done on mental health. Like he's put
Mm-hmm.
$3 million worth of his money where his mouth is. That's how much it means to him.
Mm-hmm.
Harry Miller, like you mentioned, right? Like, um, I forget who else was. There was a defensive lineman that talked about that too. How that was such a huge part of his growth as a man. Um, but I digress. This has been a fantastic conversation.